Brand Restriction. Armando Arenas, Olivares, México. Etienne Sanz de Acedo, INTA, Estados Unidos. Moderador Luis Guinard, Guinard y Noriega, Panamá.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. Welcome
Brand restrictions.
to the panel on brand restriction. In this panel, we are going to have the participation of Armando Arenas.
Armando es socio del
Armando is an associate of Olivares in Mexico,
grupo de litigio.
and he's the co-director of the litigation group. His experience goes,
Tales como consulta y
it's very wide in projects of intellectual property, the protection of commercial image, and civil and administrative actions in relation to intellectual property. We need to highlight he has a really big experience in regulatory issues, in sanitary regulation in Mexico. We also have with us in the panel Etienne Sanz de Acedo. He is the General Director of the International Trademark Association. Etienne works with the Board of Directors and functionaries to regulate and implement policies and programs for regulation, and he works in the administration and supervision of personnel and the development of and administration of the budget. Armando is going to be talking to us mainly, giving us an analysis on brand restriction currently and the situation we are on today. And Etienne is going to be with us online. He is going to be giving us a presentation about a survey that was done on brand restriction that is very interesting. The subject on brand restrictions, in my opinion, is one of the most important threats
que se presenta para los titulares de derecho
for brand owners on brand rights around the world. It is a trend
con el tema
that started
del tabaco.
with product derivatives of tobacco, and that has been permeating into other activities, risking, in many cases, the competency in between the different actors in the market. And from ACP, we have been doing important work between the competency committee that was under my direction and the regulatory committee under the direction of Armando. And we are preparing a resolution, a position paper from ACP to try to not be reactive in regards to brand restrictions
Países
that have been happening in several countries and try to have a more
basada
position with a very good foundation based on facts,
contundentes como
real facts,
Armando y Etienne.
like Armando and Etienne are going to show you in this very important conference.
Palabra
Without further ado, I give the floor to Armando to give us his presentation.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Luis. Good afternoon, everyone.
Primero, pues, los agra-
First of all, I would like to thank you to ACP for inviting me to this panel. Thank you very much. I'm also very glad to see so many familiar faces with a common interest, which is the defense on intellectual property. This is a very controversial topic, brand restrictions related to their use with food products
etiquetados,
and packaged products and non-alcoholic beverages. And this tendency
Latina y el mundo.
of restriction in Latin America and the rest of the world is not new. It's been here for a few years, and it started from the judicial point of view, right? It's very clear for us that this type of restrictions violates rights of industrial and intellectual property. It violates international treaties. It doesn't go in accordance with the legislation, actually goes against the legislation of our constitutions.
Para el gobierno,
However, for the government and for the people, it makes a lot of sense, or for politicians, it makes a lot of sense to implement destructive policies to avoid health damages, to improve nutrition,
todos
This is very plausible. We are all for it, but this discussion started at the judicial level and it got transformed into the politic level. This restriction of using brands
relacionadas con personajes infantiles
that are related to kids' characters and pets.
de la sociedad
From the point of view of the society, well, this is not
de vista política,
so relevant
ellos pueden
to them.
política
This is like a flag that they can exhibit
de evitar la
to
obesidad.
try and to avoid obesity and to try to avoid health problems in general. For attorneys, is not. For those of us that work with these types of subjects, the violation is very clear, and our job is precisely that, to bring awareness, to try and provide elements
De alguna manera,
so this, in a way, gets regulated and gets implemented in the right way.
después de un pequeño preámbulo,
So after this
de la prohibición.
little prologue, now let's go on to the topic. What is the basis on the restriction? For a few years now, we have seen labels in products, in packagings, in non-alcoholic beverage, where it is established
Advertencia, pero
a few seals of warning, but we didn't have a legislation
coloquial,
to,
los derechos de la propiedad industrial.
was actually messing with the rights of intellectual or industrial properties. This changed a few years ago. Dominican Republic started with the restriction of brands a few years ago, and it has been extended to the rest of the Latin America. On top of the restrictions on the labels, now the legislation in our countries goes beyond that, and now what they want to do, and this is actually being implemented in many countries nowadays,
El uso
is to prohibit the use
infantil
of kids' characters, animations, cartoons, pets, celebrities,
cualquier tipo de
games, meaning any kind of promotion
con este tipo
related to these kinds of figures of industrial property is prohibited in most of the countries. I'm going to use very general concepts. I'm not going to refer to any specific countries, only for very few examples that we have lived in Mexico.
que contenga
So the products containing
de advertencia,
more than one seal of warning,
exceso de calor,
if the wording is related to excess of calories, excess of sodium, excess of fat, excess of trans fats,
contenido alto calórico,
and high calorie content.
que tengan más
So those products that have more than one seal
estos derechos.
cannot use these rights.
Que se implementa esto,
How is this implemented? Well, in most of the countries use warning seals like the
advertencia negros, es que la gente
World Health Organization. The black seals are the ones that people identify the most. When you go to the supermarket, you see a seal, and that calls your attention in a matter of seconds. So that is the easiest way to identify that a product might not be so healthy. Some other countries use the traffic light system that requires a little bit of more analysis, and apparently is not the best. I mean, each country uses different seals, circles, squares, hexagons, but apparently the easiest one for people to identify as a non-healthy product is the one
tipo de
with these types of seals.
esta forma implementa un mecanismo para que la gente
How do you implement this mechanism so people in an educated and informed way can acquire a food product that's been packaged,
va a adquirir
and
productos
for them to be aware that they are going to buy a healthy product?
que sea simple.
They wanted to make it fast and simple. This is in general terms
¿No? Y
what the government and certain studies
sido.
have established.
Y viene la pregunta,
However, here's the question.
países,
Are we really compliant with this in our countries?
esta es
Unfortunately, the answer is no, and I'm going to give you a few examples. Here,
dos productos.
you can see here two products.
Paquetada,
A package of tortillas, because it's in a package.
fresca y que sean
It is required to be analyzed, to analyze the nutritional content. And at the bottom, you can see some toast.
de acuerdo con
This toast, according to the technical analysis of its content, I need to clarify that I am not a nutrition chemist. I am an attorney. This was done by a nutrition chemist. You have a very big example here. Both products have exactly the same calorie content. However, since the tortilla doesn't have, the toast doesn't have humidity and the toast does,
va
now the
a dar una
the
etiqueta.
toast needs to have a stamp, a warning stamp. So people, when they go to the supermarket, they might think that the tortilla is healthier, in comparison to the toast when they actually have the same amount of calories. So clearly, this is not very true. We have another example here of another nutritional product, the Amaranth. The Amaranth has chocolate. Both of them have chocolate. However, they have a difference of 5 grams in their content, and those 5 grams
En realidad contienen, creo que es la palabra, una diferencia adicional de calorías.
So these 5 grams imply that there is a difference on calories. The difference is 93 calories. And you can see that both of them use 2 stems. So at the moment that people go take a look at this product, they see 2 seals, they might take the one that has the most calories. So actually, they're not really making an informed decision at the time of buying this product.
Tenemos un ejemplo muy
We have a very typical example here. We like to go to the supermarket, some of us, not all of us, to buy light foods.
light, pues
We think that the light food has less calories
es un poco más sano.
and somehow is a little bit healthier. With this legislation, since
De manera puntual,
they don't really try and analyze technical things,
exactamente
these light products have the same calories as a regular product. According to the stamps, to the seals, the nutrition content needs to be analyzed, and it's possible that the light product might even have,
que sea quizás sano, ¿no? Por
it might be healthier
pero en realidad
and it has less fat, but actually, in regards to the legislation, both of them will use the same stamps. If we go to the supermarket and we see that the light product and the regular product have the same stamps, then maybe we will always going to choose the regular product,
poco
right?
contribuye
And that also doesn't contribute to the veracity and the transparency that we are looking for with the implementation of this law. We have this product that is very consumed in Mexico. We have this kind of biscuit or toast that are actually very light.
arriba.
The one at the top, they have 2 stems,
Es decir, más ingredientes,
but they have more ingredients than the other one.
tiene más
The product at the bottom has more critical ingredients, but since it has
arriba.
the product at the top has more ingredients,
Punto de vista de la persona que está
and actually from the point of view of the person that did this analysis, it will be a more nutritional product.
y el producto,
Well, this product has 2 stems, and the other one
de manera que
only has 1 stem.
existir duda va en contra de la
So here it goes against nature.
de lo que se quiere fomentar.
It goes against what we want to incentivize in the general consumer. We have another question. Is this simple? Well, yes, it is.
Que este producto es el que
You see the seals, you see the stamps, and you think, okay, so this is the product that I need to acquire because it has a stamp, or it only has 2, maybe 4. But actually, this oversimplification is not good.
el consumidor
It is not good because when the consumer goes to the supermarket, and I'm giving you an example here of a Campbell's soup can with 3 stems, but actually all soups, or most of them, would have an excess of sodium, and they all would have stems.
no sabría
The consumer, in reality, wouldn't know
que tiene un valor nutrimental.
what is a product with a superior nutritional content.
Estamos en presencia pues, de un
So what we have here is that we create a doubt,
Luis,
and like Luis commented,
ya, más de ella, de manera que es simple, pero estas
this is simple, but actually making it so simple is not helpful.
ya lo vimos.
Is it quick? Well, yes, it is. Like we saw before, you can see the stamp in 1 second. But you also want to be a little bit more thorough. You want to grab the product and you want to turn it around. This legislation speaks about a stamp in the front, something that you can see. But when you turn the product around, you have to analyze the nutritional content and you need to understand.
Una pesadilla.
Nutritional content is really a nightmare for specialists. It actually brings about discussions, arguments. It is not easy. And I think that's where we need to start. We need to have a good nutritional table that is easy to understand, that it's very digestible,
Porque de otra manera, pues no se cumple
because otherwise
con
we won't comply with this criteria, with the conditions. That it has to be true, it needs to be simple, it needs to be quick.
ahora, ¿qué hay de la comida chatarra?
What about junk food? The legislation is more centered
Normal, 60,
in the formal industry. It's centered around companies and physical person that develop products and try to comply with the regulation. But informal companies, and we do have many of them in our countries, where they sell products, out on the streets, they are not regulated.
productos que
Well, and you can see here products that are being sold in big amounts,
ellos no están,
and they don't have any stamps, they don't have any kind of information,
están haciendo
any kind of nutritional information, and they are still being sold.
de porcentaje.
And from the point of view of a percentage, we don't have a very clear study on this food, but we say that, or we think that
De esos productos consumidos
30% of these products are consumed on the streets without any kind of regulation.
con el objeto por estas
So then we wouldn't be actually getting to the purpose.
regulación. En
What about over-regulation? In Mexico, we have, on top of the fact that our authorities are very restrictive
el uso de
in regards to
industrial,
the use of this kind of industrial property rights for these kinds of food, we have a restriction on the quality stamps to recognize the nutritional value of foods.
que la
With this, what they want to do is that the sanitary authorities or the regulatory authorities analyze these products and submit authorizations or certifications that certify that the product does have nutritional value.
va a ser más caro para
And in this case, the cost is going to be increased. It's going to be more bureaucratic. Authorities are not really, so efficient. Some are, some aren't. So from my point of view, over-regulation is not helpful either. We also have a normative project in relations to regarding advertisement. That will also be very restrictive because not only they will be prohibiting the use of these brands in packaged goods,
prohibiendo
but they would also be prohibiting the advertisement of these products. When I say advertising, I'm talking about anything, not just the common advertising in media, in magazines, in digital media, but also advertising
un producto,
that you might find in the packaging of a product.
publicidad para identificar los productos donde
It is common to have advertisement in the packaging
mucho tipo de
for you to be able to recognize the product very easily.
estática, por ejemplo, en los estadios
So this will restrict any kind of advertising that you can do on the product itself.
es prohibirlo.
All of this with the intention of prohibiting it. And from my point of view, this is also
Titulares de los derechos de
something that goes against the competency.
una imagen,
We have an image here of something that is already happening in Mexico,
la prohibición de
and that is the
chatarra,
prohibition of selling junk food. It doesn't really define what junk food is.
muy
It only says it in a very generalized way of the prohibition of selling junk food in schools. So from my point of view, it is an over-regulation as well. I don't think this should be the example to follow. This has been happening in many states, not in the entire country, but in some states in the Republic of Mexico.
un equilibrio
This doesn't help us find an equilibrium between the brand owners
objetivo. El objetivo es tener una nutrición adecuada,
the competition
pues buscar la
and of finding good balanced nutrition. and the general health of the population. Here I have another example.
donde en México
This is also happening in Mexico.
el gobierno está distribuyendo
The government is distributing pamphlets where they accuse
que fabrican estos productos.
the companies that manufacture these products of
Esto
fooling the population. Of course, this
en realidad no engañan a la población.
this is a smear campaign because these companies are not fooling the population. They create jobs, they pay taxes, they are compliant with the sanitary regulations, they have their industrial certifications, they pay a fee to be able to commercialize their products. We're talking about an entire chain of commercialization. They're not fooling anybody, but the information from the point of view of the government, in this case in Mexico, also provoke a smear campaign that affects the reputation of the companies. And I think this is really bad and it shouldn't be done. Where are we going? We are heading towards limitation of the rights on industrial property. This is very evident. We all know this, and I repeat,
para la sociedad
it is not
no es tan
that's not very clear for the society or for politicians. That's not very clear for certain sectors, but it is very clear to us.
situación no llegue
So we have to try and make the situation not to move any further.
genérico, ¿no?
We don't want to be, we don't want to go to generic packaging like in these images.
No quiero ser fa-
Maybe we, are going to get there. I don't want to be fatalist or extremist, but we might get there. Generic packaging, a generic packaging where we're only going to have
de una misma
products of one species without
información
having any information on the characteristics, on the features, and the nature of that product. And that, well, like I said before, it's not good for competition, for good competition. That doesn't help anybody, especially our countries that are looking for investments and for a growing economy. We're looking for development,
de bueno, el resto, los países llamados del primer mundo.
like the first world countries. I wanted to use this image
Un poco de lo que sucede con nuestra
because it says a little bit about what is happening with our tobacco industry. If this keeps going, in a few years,
pegar en las
maybe governments will
productos
request to have in the labels images of products.
que pueden caries, que
They will make us write in the label, okay, this can cause cavities, this can cause obesity problems, this can cause diabetes. I'm being very extremist. This is just to give you an example of what might happen in the future. I hope this never happens, but it looks like things are moving in that direction.
ahora les voy a plantear
Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what is the judicial analysis on why these normatives violate rights.
nuestras
They go against our normatives,
nacionales,
against international treaties.
generales y voy
I'm going to mention the most general ones, and I'm only going to limit myself to the example of Mexico, which is what I'm more familiar with. It violates proprietary rights because obviously brands
de las empresas.
are one of the,
No lo
most valuable assets in the companies.
tenemos aquí
And in this case, according to this legislation, you are not able to use that right. It clearly violates
y otra
a right that was given by the state. And on
el
top of that, the state is also restricting the use of that right, which is completely illegal, and it goes against the legislation or the law itself.
quiero entrar en una
And it's not necessary that we start arguing about violation of rights. Maybe we can talk about later on. But from my point of view,
ponderación de tiene más valía.
we're not talking about which right is bigger, the right for health or the commercial right,
No, derecho.
right to have the right to intellectual property or industrial property.
La libertad
But this law restricts the freedom of being able to exercise a previously given right. And to give you an example,
no podrían las celebridades, los deportistas,
for example, celebrities,
toda esta gente famosa, cantantes,
athletes, famous people, singers, they wouldn't be able to participate in promotions.
este tipo de gente tampoco
So on top of the brands and other people that couldn't use these brands, singers and celebrities, they wouldn't be able to use them as well. So this affects in a really bad way the right
Los derechos
to free competition.
están gravemente afectados.
Economic rights
Los tratados
are being affected really badly because international treaties and our normatives, what they analyze and what they establish is precisely that, to try to avoid barriers to commerce,
más fácil en términos muy coloquiales.
to facilitate commerce. And these types of regulations are actually very restrictive. The right for information to consumers. Consumers have the right to choose. They have the right to be informed. They have the right to know what type of product they are going to consume in an informed way, not in the way that we just saw.
Punto de vista,
So from my point of view,
tipo de derechos,
you are also violating that right. It is a violation to the freedom of speech. It's a copyright infringement as an expression of human dignity. What about the others?
que producen
What about the others that produce work, drawings and that have commercial value? And this piece of work is incorporated into a label and then other media, and they won't be able to use them. So you're also restricting this kind of rights. In regards to the economic right, I think that is the clearest one. It inhibits, this law inhibits the freedom of trading.
la legislación. Este tema es,
About the legislation, this is a very interesting topic, and I am only going to use a few examples, very clear examples.
todos compartimos la misma legislación.
Not all of us share the same legislation, but I think the principles that we do share are very clear. The clearest one is
Industrial,
the legislation in regards of industrial property.
marca,
What sense does it make to have a trademark?
tener un eslogan,
What sense does it make to have a slogan if we cannot use it? What's the point on having a brand that we cannot sell,
explotar.
that we cannot exploit? It is absurd. So it is a very clear violation
Propiedad intelectual.
to the right of intellectual property. The legislation in regards of copyright, it is very clear as well.
Términos
The copyright law, in very general terms, what it wants to do is to incentivize human creativity. And with this legislation, instead of incentivizing it, it inhibits it.
también contra la
And that also goes against
Comisión
competitiveness.
de Protección a los Consumidores, pues ya lo mencioné.
So in regards of the right of consumers, I already mentioned that. The owners have the right to use their brands. And consumers have the right to choose.
Los titulares
And on top of that, the brand owners have the right to advertise
y esta legislación
the rights on industrial properties. And this law inhibits that, and it inhibits that directly, which is illegal.
americana
The American Declaration on Human Rights. Even though this is more generalized,
es
it is also very clear.
como
This type of rights is recognized as human rights. The human rights of non-discrimination, propriety, freedom of work, freedom of opinion, freedom of speech, freedom of diffusion are inhibited. They cannot be exploited.
que nos dedicamos a esta materia, pues
And for those of us who work in this is a very clear violation.
explotación y el uso de
It inhibits the exploitation and the use of these rights. ADPIC is a
interés.
very interesting case
ADPIC sí es
because the ADPIC do establish an article
que los gobiernos
that
sí están facultados
ordains that governments do have the authority to establish measures
y la
to protect the health and nutrition of the population. But if you analyze that declaration or that topic, yes, it seems like it does give the government the authority to implement these kinds of sanitary and regulatory
también claro en establecer
actions, but also the ADPIC is also very clear in establishing some conditions. What are these conditions? Well, first of all, you shouldn't go against the purpose of the agreement in itself. The purpose of the agreement is to boost, to incentivize industrial property, to incentivize the commerce, to make it easier for governments and for industrial people to create appropriate conditions for trading.
este tipo de regulaciones
So it's very clear that this kind of regulations go against these purposes in the ADPIC. Actually, there is a provision, there is an article, I think it's the second article, that also establishes that the nature of the product cannot be a cause
este tipo de restricciones
for these kinds of restrictions
que
to be of such nature that they prohibit the use of the rights of industrial property.
en primer momento
So it may have seemed at the beginning that
nacional
this international treaty was going to be beneficial, but it is not. From my point of view, it's not beneficial.
la convención de Berna pues es también muy clara.
The Berna Convention is also very clear. It incentivizes the creation of this kind of legislations.
Lo restringen. El tratado de la
This kind of legislations is very restrictive. The Treaty of UMPI about copyright,
evita la difusión de
this also inhibits the diffusion of work
el-
in the digital environment, which goes against the right of owners, brand owners.
los acuerdos sobre obstáculos técnicos al comercio
The agreements on technical obstacles in commerce, it is very interesting because it also gives the authorization to the governments to establish any kind of measures that go about protecting the rights of consumers.
derecho de los consumidores
And I say here the rights of consumers, and it seems in a way, it looks like you are also
artes técnicas que
giving the government to create normatives, to create guidelines that protect the rights of owners.
legislación en términos generales. Sin
However,
embargo, lo que establece
what this agreement establishes is that these conditions
de ser las menos onerosas,
will have
las
to be the less honorable ones, the ones that don't inhibit commerce,
objetivos hay que ser congruentes
meaning you have to be objective, you have to be congruent
con la regulación,
with the regulation. However,
naturaleza que se provoque
it cannot be of such nature as to provoke an obstacle, as to become an obstacle to commerce.
sido que no debe haber medidas
They have established that you shouldn't have such restrictive measures for international commerce,
medida
international trading, and this is clearly a measure that constitutes an obstacle, a technical obstacle for commerce.
globales, las
Because what's going to happen with global companies, companies that manufacture products and sell it to the entire world, in this case, they wouldn't be able to sell their products if they have cartoons or pets or drawings. Let's say they want to be sold in Mexico, they wouldn't be able to do that. If they manufacture it in Brazil and they want to be sold in Mexico, they clearly wouldn't be able to do it. So that is a clear obstacle to free commerce.
hace algunos años un panel de la
And we did have a panel a few years ago from the International World of Commerce, International Organization of Commerce.
crisis que están planteando
They have already planning on doing some analysis to present in some panels.
es un gobierno
In Mexico, they wouldn't dare do it because we also have a government that is not very helpful. We don't have a lot of communication with them, but we have received some consultations from some companies. Some companies are already planning on doing a panel to have a discussion about this kind of violations. The Free Commerce Treaty,
mencionamos
we have also mentioned that the objective is to reduce distortions in commerce, in trading, and to not have any obstacles. That is the main purpose.
el detalle de la protección
And then let's talk about details of protection in industrial property, patents, blah, blah, blah. But in reality, in all of our countries, we have some kind of treaty on free trading. And if we apply this law, we would be violating these treaties. And the the Paris Treaty
los derechos de propiedad industrial.
would be violated as well.
Conclusión,
They wouldn't be respecting the rights of industrial property.
pues,
So as a conclusion, my position is
para ejercerse,
that rights need to be executed. They need to be honored. If they are not honored, then we are just going to keep them there
una marca que porque
in a drawer. We are going to have a brand that is going to finish. Basically, it's going to be terminated because nobody is using it.
no donde queda la inversión. Entonces,
And then you have an investment that is going to be lost.
es los derechos se ejercen.
Basically, final conclusions.
Este es el primer caso
This is the first case that have been resolved in Mexico.
en vigor el año pasado. Es
This norm started being effective last year. It is a very restrictive norm. It completely violates the law, the treaties, and the Constitution. And
trató de cumplir con la norma.
you know, most of the company tried to comply with this guideline, with this regulation, but one of them actually resisted the norm,
Simple.
and they won in the first instance with a very simple argument. Everyone that does this in Mexico knew about this. It turns out that the norm, the guideline, the 051 in Mexico
A través de una autoridad
was established through the administrative authority, and what the judge decided is that this cannot be done through an administrative authority. It needs to be done through the Congress. I mean, it is a
administrativa.
legislation act, not an administration act. Because of this, it's illegal. It is illegal, and it goes against the principle of law reservation. These kinds of regulations
No a las
are reserved to the law, not to the official Mexican law that are of technical nature. Because of this, it is illegal, and as such, it was declared by this resolution, according to our system,
a la empresa que lo hizo.
it is only applied to that company.
Es primera instancia, no es final.
They won in first instance. It's not the final verdict, but from my point of view, this is very simple, it is very clear, and it needs to prevail.
Justicia
It's probably going to go to the Supreme Court of Justice, and from my point of view, it needs to be ratified, it needs to be confirmed. However, it doesn't go to the bottom of things. The bottom of the issue is that this norm, this regulation that prohibits the use of industry property rights, actually goes against the main purpose of having healthy nutrition.
es decir, derecho a la
I
salud.
mean, how are you going to restrict the right to health?
A la
That is the argument
que lleguemos en poco tiempo
that we might need to have very shortly, in my point of view.
a llegar a esa discusión.
We don't need to go to that argument. And to give you an example, we have a pharmaceutical company.
Sí o no, colisión de derechos.
They had a contradiction or a coalition of rights between the access to medication and the patent owners.
Bueno, no siempre, se había resuelto por algunos tribunales.
It had been resolved by some courthouses that the access to medication has prevalence over the commercial interest of the companies. And because of this, talking about litigation, this right
Prevalencia, y lo que se resolvió es
had the prevalence, and what they determined is that no, both rights complement each other. You can't have medication without having a patent.
las patentes.
So you have to respect patents, and once they are of public dominion, then we can have generic medication.
No es necesario.
From my point of view, it's not necessary to get to these kinds of arguments,
Discusiones, quise decir,
to these kinds of discussions.
conclusiones finales.
And now I'm going to go to the final conclusions.
Y desde mi punto de vista,
From my point of view,
tenemos que pensar un poco
what we have to think about a little or a lot is in the public interest.
de la sociedad
The public interest of the society, meaning
interesada
the society is interested in having access
la innovación,
to innovation,
la creatividad,
access to creativity,
al desarrollo,
access to the development,
a realizar todo ese tipo de actividades comerciales
access to do all those kinds of commercial activities that incentivize
y fomenta.
development.
Eso es lo que se tiene
They incentivize the development, the advancement of society.
de los niños, el interés superior de la niñez.
We need to keep the interest, the interest of good health in mind.
en avance.
And also, we have the interest of the society in moving forward in advancement.
Y yo creo que si partimos de esa idea, podemos,
And if we go from that idea,
pues, no sé, podemos
I think we can find
un resultado que deje contento.
very good results that leaves everybody happy.
Situaciones que debemos de buscar.
Some of the situations we need to look for are
Derecho, no
coincidence,
otro.
where one right doesn't regulate another. Processes of education, just like you teach,
Pues,
physical education in school, you need to also teach them in the same subject of physical education, nutrition education. If you teach people from, the age of being very, very young to how to eat properly, they are going to keep imitating that as they grow. I think this is a very good way of going about it, not only in school, but also at home.
no recuerdo si lo-
I was talking to somebody about it earlier today. Certification brands can be a very good help. Auto regulation in companies. This works in Europe and it works more or less okay. We had the opportunity in our countries to have auto regulation. From my point of view, they didn't take the opportunity. That would have been a very good way, asking the companies to auto-regulate themselves and, have that happen right now. We wouldn't be debating right now whether or not they can use the
Debe ser
industrial property rights. The information, it needs to be transparent, it needs to be clear, easy to understand, and we have not gotten there. We have not gotten there because we have not taken the time of doing it well. We leave it to governments. Governments do it in a very rushed way, sometimes an arbitrary way.
legales que no.
And there we have some legal loopholes that are not helpful. And as an attorney, from my point of view, and I said it earlier,
Y tenemos
you need to honor the rights, and we have all of the tools to honor them, to enforce them. From my point of view, we have to sue,
acotando
and we have to shorten the path in a way for the authorities to do their job correctly
restrictivo, tan restrictivo,
and avoid such big restrictions, such big prohibitions that attempt against free competition and free market. Thank you so much for your attention. And now I will take some questions. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Armando.
Thank you very much, Armando.
La conferencia comenzó un poquito tarde, vamos a darle el
Since we started a little bit late, let's move to Etienne,
acompañando.
that is here with us remotely.
Muchas gracias, Etienne, por
Thank you very much, Etienne, for your participation.
pues, la presentación. Ya
I invite you to watch the presentation because it contains very impressive data and very interesting data about a survey prepared by the International Trading Association. Etienne, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Luis. Thank you, Armando, for the brilliant presentation. Before beginning, I would like to thank a few people. First of all, the organizational committee of this Congress in Punta Cana that is honestly doing a very big job. It's been a great success, at least from what I can see here. Also to the exiting committee that is leaving, especially Elizabeth Simpson, the president, and also the incoming board of directors. ACP, INTA, and INTA are friend associations. They are associates. They are sister associations. And I will ask you before beginning, I will ask you to let me make a comment and a request. The comment is that even though we are used already to this virtual world, interacting with people in person is always more complex. So because of that, I apologize to you in advance if at any point I can't hear some of the questions or comments. The second thing is a request, and that is to please stop posting pictures on Instagram and in Facebook, being at the beach, drinking, doing yoga, because those of us that are not right now in Punta Cana, we feel a very healthy sense of jealousy of all of you. So that is my little request. Now, being serious, I would like to present to you a very impact study done by INPA in the year of 2020. As you can see, it is a study that was done between October and November of 2020. It is a study that was done in 10 different countries. 4 of those in Central America, Latin America, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, India, Mexico, Singapore, South Africa, South Korea, Thailand, and the UK. And in each one of those countries, we surveyed 500 participants to reach a global number of 5,000 people that answered this survey. As you can see on the right side of the slide, 2,500 were the Gen Zers and 2,500 were millennials, or practically the equality between males and females. We also tried to be very balanced among those people that had family responsibilities and those who didn't. The study that is obviously available at the webpage of INTA gave us 6 conclusions, 6 fundamental conclusions, I would say. The first one is something that we already know as professionals of rights in industrial property, is that brands, commercially speaking, they play a fundamental role in the life of consumers. As you can see here, generally speaking, 68% of the people that were surveyed recognized that they trust in brands. And as you can see, the distribution among the countries, this varies between 80% in countries like India and Thailand, and it goes down to 40% in Chile. But what is maybe even more interesting is that that trust in brands practically goes over almost in 30% the trust that consumers have in the administration of their own media. On top of this, 45% of the surveyed people consider that brands in some kind of way reflect personal values of each of the people that were surveyed. Again, you can see here a variation between more and less developed countries. So in the countries that are less developed, the perception or the reflection on personal values is bigger than in the most developed countries. On another hand, this is something that we also know more from the marketing perspective. 62% of the people that were surveyed recognized that they will feel disappointed if any of those brands disappeared. And some of them manifested that they cannot live without a certain brand. This was 50% of the people that were surveyed. This is very important information because when we talk about brand restrictions, brand packaging in their different formats, this is really affecting the perception of the consumers. Once we saw this, I think it is important to share with the attendees the loyalty, the consumer loyalty, and how this loyalty varies in between the different sectors. As you can see in this slide, consumer loyalty towards the brands is particularly strong in sectors like tobacco, kids products, pharmaceutical products, and in a certain way, cosmetic products of personal care products. However, on the contrary, this loyalty goes lower significantly when we talk about food products or non-alcoholic beverages. This slide is particularly interesting. What we try to demonstrate here is what are the main reasons, the 3 main reasons that justify consumer loyalty towards the brands. And as you can see, in the case of kids products, pharmaceutical products, cosmetic products, and alcoholic beverages, this is based on the trust. In contrast, in the case of tobacco and food products, it is based more on, being used to consume a specific product or on the perception of those products. thinking that that brand is going to give more quality to the product. Now let's talk about another aspect that is very fundamental, which is visual elements of the brands. Armando was talking about characters, kids characters, pets, interactive elements. Let's see how these elements actually influence the consumer perception. First of all, the main three benefits recognized in regards to the visual effects of brands are that they show, they value the quality of the product, they demonstrate quality of the product, it facilitates the process of purchase, and on top of that, it makes it easier for you to make a decision, and they generate more trust towards the products that the consumer is going to buy. Having said that, what is very interesting is to see what are the things that really influence the decision of the consumer. As we're going to see, number one is the price, followed by the information, the sanitary information, public health information, and third and fourth places, nutritional information and composition of the products. And in contrast, the visual elements that we talked about before are the last factors that influence the decision of a decision of purchase. The pets, colors, the brand logo, etc., which tells us in a way statistically that if these are the factors that have the less influence in the decision of the consumers, by removing them from the products, they are not going to modify the decision of the consumers. In regards of nutritional information and composition of the products or services, 57% of the people that were surveyed, they prefer to see this information at the back, in the back of the packaging of the product or service. 55% of them consider that this information is easily accessible. And finally, almost in 50% that consider that the information that is currently available is enough at the time of making a decision of purchase. On top of what we have saw in regards to the importance of the brands, in regards to the concept of loyalty, in regards to visual elements, among other elements, in regards to the decision making to purchase a product, these next slides are very important and interesting because they demonstrate that in a way consumers don't understand the reasoning behind brand restrictions. Practically 50% of the consumers believe that brand packaging is introduced by the brand itself in order for them to reduce production costs. Obviously, this is very concerning for the brand owners. The data is very significant in certain countries like South Africa, South Korea, and Colombia. Let me go to the extremes, meaning when you remove the animations or the pets in the cereal from the cereal packaging, in both cases, you can see that practically reason number one or number two, according to the consumers, have happened from the brand owner to be able to reduce the production costs that they launch into the market. Having said that, in a few jurisdictions where we know that they have implemented brand packaging, in the case of Latin America, Chile, and Mexico, yes, it is true that consumers recognize that for health reasons and legislation in regards to advertising are the main reasons to remove the brands from the products. You can see that in the last line when we talk about different scenarios that have to do with the fight against obesity. But the global percentages are in about 14, 15% in the case of Mexico and Chile. These percentage are double, meaning that if you talk about 14%, you have to talk about a 34, 35%. 34, 35% is now 70%.
Independientemente de los motivos legales,
So because of that, in spite of the legal reasons that Armando exposed earlier today,
mercadeo,
from the point of view of a marketing study, the brand restrictions
teniendo
may not be having the objectives
de
that the authorities wanted to get with them in the long run. As you can see here in this slide,
uno de cada
only 1 out of 3 consumers considers
marcas
brand restrictions
tomar decisiones.
to help them make more healthy decisions, whether for them or their families.
Vamos un poco al detalle de los sectores.
And if we talk about a little bit of details of the sectors, 46% of the people that were surveyed will still drink alcohol, 43% would still smoke exactly in the same conditions,
43
and 43% of the people that were surveyed globally indicated that
mensajes empaquetados de los productos
if they found messages in the packaging of the products, this is really not going to change their behavior.
a ver esas etiquetas, esos mensajes y simplemente los obvio.
They will simply, pass those products by.
Son muy interesantes.
The next 2 slides are very interesting.
Mostrar
In some kind of way, they demonstrate that even though, you receive the pets, you have the pets in packaging of cereals, or if you eliminate all of these elements in the nutritional goods, 64% of the consumers would still buy cereal,
comprando estos mismos productos.
and 42% of the consumers would still buy the same personal care products. And this can also be applied to informative labels in cereal products or the warning messages in personal care products.
Sea todo ello,
Again, in spite of all of that, 64% of consumers would still buy the same cereals, for example, and 52% would still buy the same personal care products.
preguntados y como ven,
Because of this,
incorporamos
we need to ask ourselves, the question is,
cuál es la contestación,
so,
el porcentaje con respecto a la pregunta en cuestión. Un 47
47% of the people that were surveyed considered that the generic packaging, if we get to plain packaging,
y un
is excessive, and 43% considered
packaging no ayudaría a los
that plain packaging wouldn't help the consumers
saludables.
to make healthy decisions at the time of buying products.
El apoyo por parte de los
So because of this, the support from the consumers to brand restrictions is very low.
si miramos este
Actually, if we look at this slide, we will see that 87% of the people that were surveyed, and again, we are talking about Gen Zers and millennials, consider that the restrictions, brand restrictions,
impactos económicos negativos
would have negative economic impacts for the respective countries and economies.
acerca de quién
We asked
formas
about who would need to assume responsibility in guaranteeing
productos
that the consumers choose healthy products. 43% of the people that were surveyed considered that the consumers themselves, individuals, need to be responsible. 33% said the brands would need to help with that, and only 20% of the people that were surveyed considered that this is responsibility of the governments to help consumers make healthier decisions through measures like brand packaging or brand restrictions.
Otro aspecto muy interesante,
Another very interesting aspect
¿cuál podría ser el impacto que puede tener
is to see what could be the impact that plain packaging could have in the behavior of consumers or the perception of consumers
llevar a
if
unas medidas de
we actually had some absolute restriction measures or very significant limitations of visual elements from brands in the packaging of the products. 34% of the people that were surveyed will have doubts of whether or not you have an original product or a counterfeit product. 24% of the consumers would think that the product is less safe, and 28% of the people that were surveyed would have doubts at the time of choosing the product, and they would be afraid of making a mistake when buying a product at the supermarket.
Finalmente, cuando se refiere a
Finally, when we talk about this kind of measures and, what alternative measures do we have, 60% of the people that were surveyed considers that the work of administrations and governments will be more educational instead of removing those brands, the brands from the products and services. And 40% of the surveyed people, in regards to what Armando was saying before,
la
said that they are limiting free speech, free expression.
Quizás estas son las últimas
Maybe these are the last slides, but I think this is very significant, very important. And this talks about
estos distintos
to what extent the consumers think that these measures of plain packaging would have some kind of efficacy or effectiveness, or how they think they would impact the protection of health. As you can see, one of the countries that has developed brand restrictions or plain packaging the most is Chile.
de la efectividad
However, the perception of the effectiveness on those restrictions from the consumers is very low. So, to conclude, 60% of consumers would prefer to be able to choose by themselves what are the products that they want to consume. 65% consider that the ideal solution is for brands to add nutritional information and information to the consumers, and 78% advocate for more education to the consumers,
edades más
particularly from younger ages and at the school level.
llego un poco a la conclusión de esta
So with this, I conclude the presentation of this data.
que es
Again, this is a presentation that is available for all of the members of INTA and all of you today as well. It is available at the webpage, in the webpage. And another comment is that
respectivos países lamentablemente
as all of the countries start to, unfortunately, adopting all of these measures, we will need to not only argue judicially, like Armando said, but we also have to take this data and present them to the
quizás
attorneys or to the court of law in the different countries and try to get our authorities to adopt better measures. Just to give you an example, at the global level, we have over 60 countries that are applying some kind of restriction to the industry of tobacco. 35 countries are already doing it to alcoholic beverages. We have at least 3 countries that are applying it radically in pharmaceutical products, and at least 15 countries are doing it
alimentos alto
in regards to food with high
grasas, azúcar,
fat content or high sugar content, etc., etc. So it is a growing problem. It is a problem that worries us a lot as brand owners, and I think it is a problem that both INTA and ACP need to follow very closely and keep working jointly on this. Thank you very much. Thank you, Luis and Armando, for sharing the panel with me.
Muchas gracias, Etienne. Muchas gracias, Armando.
Thank you very much, Etienne. Thank you very much, Armando, for your excellent talks. To round this up a little, and we are going to have a short period of questions and answers because we are over time. We started a little later because of lunch. I feel that I think governments are taking the easy way out of putting all of the liability, all of the responsibility in the companies, when first of all you need to have education, you need to educate people instead of trying to restrict rights that were acquired legally and that are valid. And it's been shown that that's not the way to go, right? I don't have exact numbers, but there are studies that in Chile it has not worked the measure. Chile was the 8th country with an obesity problem after having the measures for several years. Chile is the 2nd country with obesity problems. Obviously, the measure is not to blame, but it clearly shows that the purpose that it was created for has completely failed. I think this topic,
no está teniendo el resultado.
I think this measure is not having the expected results. We need to find measures that go in accordance with the final purpose.
para
Now we are going to open brief time for questions and answers. Please be as brief as possible. Hi, this is Uvalis Pons. Excellent presentations, Etienne and Armando. My question is for Armando in regards to the recent sentence in Mexico. From what I've heard is that the decision is only effective for the company that invested resources, but I understand that we are all the same before the law. My question is, all of the other companies that are regulated by this rule, by this law, can they use this after it's revocable? The second question is, keeping in mind that it is a norm, it is a law that is not supposed to limit rights. From what I understand, they had to regulate the label so the consumer can see in a clear and true way the information about the nutrition facts.
De los productos, no podía poner limitaciones a las marcas. Básicamente la resolución concluye de esta forma, no podía prohibir el uso.
So basically they couldn't restrict the use of the brand. That's my understanding. This norm actually modifies or amends a legislation, a law. Do you think that in the Supreme Court the sentence will be confirmed, will be ratified? Thank you. The resolution per se can clearly be used by other companies. The sentence is public, I didn't mention that, and it does work as a precedent. We need to bring it to the authorities to have it enforced. The only thing is that the main argument, basically the way in which the authorities established this norm with technical character was very rushed. They didn't do it the same way. They should have done it through legislation. Because of this, from my point of view, legally speaking, there's no way that this is going to change in court. What I would do is to try to do a review of the sentence to analyze the bottom of the problem, not just the way, not just the form, but the bottom of it. We need to know if it's legal or not, if this kind of restriction is legal or not. And how do you find a way, judicially speaking, to make it just and fair, like Etienne mentioned? So judicially speaking, the sentence, from my point of view, needs to be confirmed in the next court. The Supreme Court, actually, also attended to the same problem in regards to labeling. They already established that these kinds of rules need to be coherent. There needs to be regulatory cohesion. You cannot have one right allowing you to buy or to receive a seal of intellectual property, and then in another one have a norm that restricts it. It's absurd, it's illegal, it's crazy. So we need to have regulatory cohesion. That needs to be the point of view. From the point of view of the judicial system, I do litigation, so that's how I would go about. From the point of view of sanitary policies, we need to talk about everything that Etienne talked about, statistics, data, what the information says. That is very valuable and it's exact. And that can maybe give us maybe tell us what way we should go about this, how we should work on the legislation to affect the industry the least.
Luis, si me permites, me gustaría...
Luis, if you allow me, I would like to maybe complement what you said a little. Since Wallis asked the question, I want you to please allow me to thank both Wallis Pons and Samantha Braga, because both of them are members of ACP, members of INTA, and they have actively participated in the elaboration of the study that we presented previously. So it is important to recognize that. Going back to your question, Wallis, and to what Armando said, I think one of the elements that we need to consider as well is to use the figure of amicus brief, however possible. So when we have cases that go to an appeal instances or to Supreme Court, we can present these judicial arguments, but again, economical arguments,
Estas medidas
meaning
tienen un impacto
how these measures are going to impact the
social de
GDP, the social well-being of the different countries, because we seem to be forgetting that we are in a period of crisis, we are in a global economy, and these measurements are only going to harm the industry in many of our countries.
Acá tenemos una pregunta.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Felipe,
This is Felipe Cabral from
congratulations.
Brazil. Congratulations, Armando and Etienne, for
Presentations and complementary to each other. I can fully understand all the legal arguments and all the economics behind the arguments that we are using against legislators. But on the other hand, the right to information from consumers is a very powerful argument to legislators in general. So the issue that I would like to raise here is the issue of self-regulation that Armando mentioned by the end of his presentation. How could we use the self-regulation in favor of all those arguments? Because I can see similarity here to what has happened to the advertisement industry in the 70s and 80s, where several countries have organized self-regulation entities, such as Guinard, that I see is very active in Brazil and also in Mexico. We have NAD, a National Advertising Division in the USA. So in this field, the advertising industry could be organized in this self-regulation initiative that could block, and nowadays it's still working, could block all the laws to regulate advertising in general. So could we use self-regulation in this favor, and how could we use it? Do you have any ideas on that?
La pregunta para Etienne, para mí, para
Is the question for Etienne, for me, or it doesn't matter? Para ambos. Etienne, do you want to?
Tú estás in situ.
Gracias.
Please, Armando, you're in situ. Go ahead.
El punto
I will tell you that from the point of view of the
que ahora apunta
problematic
a la publicidad es
in regards to advertisement,
los gobiernos,
what I've noticed is that the governments are trying
la marca.
to restrict not only the brand, also on advertisement. And the topic of advertisement,
Peligroso.
I think it's even more dangerous.
Todavía no hay una legislación
We don't have a clear legislation about it.
que lo hayan analizado. Cuando
We don't have any analysis, at least in Mexico, in regards to advertisement and restriction on advertisement. We haven't thoroughly analyzed it, and we don't have the legal tools
caso que se haya planteado, bueno,
in a case. I mean, we do have the legal tools, we just haven't analyzed it. So I will tell you that the argument and the problematic needs to be attacked in the same way, and of course,
unos argumentos, habrá que ver, es el
we
caso.
need to be able to use the same arguments.
La situación en Brasil,
I don't know what the situation is in Brazil, but I can tell you that that's how I would go about it.
Sí, yo quizás incidiendo en lo que decía Armando, yo creo que uno de los aspectos que los titulares
Talking about what Armando was saying, one of the arguments that the brand owners need to ask themselves is to maybe be more proactive about informing more and informing the consumers in a better way. Because at the end of the day, this is a tsunami that started with the tobacco sector
alcohólicas, a las bebidas
that is spreading to alcohol beverages, spirituous beverages, kids products, toys, and we won't have a way to stop it unless the industrial guilds, industrial groups try to find mechanisms where in one way we use judicial arguments, economic arguments, but also we give enough information to the consumers to maybe in a way try to limit the argument from the public health institutions that the different governments are using. And one aspect we haven't touched today, and I think it's important from the judicial point of view, if you limit the use of a brand,
de uso del signo. Es decir, si no se puede usar el signo que está registrado,
if you cannot use the brand like it's registered, then later on we can find lack of use of that.
que es más derecho administrativo, pero
And now we go more to administrative rights. but that can also permeate to the judicial arguments.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Etienne. Thank you very much, Armando. I think
Preguntas que nos gustaría.
we all have more questions, but unfortunately, we don't have enough time.
Así es que nuevamente les agradecemos
Again, we thank you
por brillantes presentaciones.
for your brilliant
Así,
presentations. We'd like to thank ACP again, because like I said at the beginning, the topic on brand restriction is the biggest threat
momento los titulares.
that brand owners are facing right now around the world.
Importante que
And it's important
como INTA
for entities like ACP and INTA to promote knowledge globally
que
of this problematic
para todos y
that is going to touch everybody,
para defender así
and we need to be prepared to defend it. So thank you very much,
con el siguiente
and we invite you to continue with the next panel.
aquí en República Dominicana.
Today in the Dominican Republic, thank you, Etienne.
Gracias, Etienne. Saludos.
Thank you, Etienne.